Okay, so we come to the last talk of the day, and you could view this as the last talk of the academic year as well, I guess. For the oh, so no pressure there. Don't
No pressure, no.
don't worry. So we'll just kick off because then we can finish off today with some thoughts on what we'll be doing next year. Okay, so finish off with V Perisic with my challenges in teaching analysis during COVID-19 pandemic and what I did about them. So Vesna.
Okay. Okay, so here are my screens. Thank you very much for giving me opportunity to talk about my challenges and what I did about them, because basically they occupied me most of the last year, or I don't know, since the lockdown. So what I'm going to say is basically, so it is to teach analysis in general is a challenge. So I will just give the kind of skeleton, how it looked like before COVID, what I did looking at that structure through the perspective of the COVID, and how the structure is going to be in the post-COVID time that I hope we are entering. So this is, and then, so in brief, teaching and assessment. So in the pre-COVID time, as a module, most of our modules, there were per week 3 lectures, 1 problem class. Assessment was 80% closed book exam, 20% coursework, and coursework was composed of 2 components, each 10%. One was 1 in-class test marked by PhD students, and another 10% would be for the homeworks. That was individual work that every second week students would submit and would be marked by PhD students. Now, the COVID time, so basically it was unclear. So I did kind of, in a way, mimicking what was previously. This I will say a bit later, a bit more of these pre-recorded sessions, but basically there were pre-recorded sessions that we can kind of say. 1 live online session where people are encouraged to ask the questions. And then they were in-person sessions in small groups. And this was the only module with that kind of structure, and I will say with that about that as well. And so now the rating of the coursework and the exam has changed 40–60%, and mainly of the colleagues kind of changed like that, and was open book exam over was 2+1, that's 3 hours in a period of 12 hours. And the components of the coursework, again, my homeworks were 20%, 15% I didn't have in-class tests but small quizzes, and 5% was reflective journal. And so I will tell you a bit about each of these components and kind of, so in my picture. So here is, so teaching material. Basically for this is a compulsory module. And at some point we started kind of to develop a booklet, or giving the booklets to the students for the compulsory module. And here is analysis booklet that basically I organized with a material that was kind of created by many people that were also teaching analysis before. I teach module, I must say, since 2012. So then I have recorded, I mentioned this, 2 pre-recorded sessions. I did recorded sessions and they are organized in folders according to the weeks. And having already these lecture notes, I kind of sometimes would kind of guide students to, would be like a guided reading. I would say, okay, now stop and look at the lecture notes and then look at this and so on. And this kind of recording okay, I will tell you where was my recording. And then in addition, there are many examples in this booklet, and I did using explain everything, recorded quite few examples, step by step, explaining the procedures and how to deal with examples and theory. And I basically, students would email me, could you do this one? And then I would record and put on the Blackboard. Okay, so this is where I sit now, and I will not kind of go much into this structure, but it is in our garden, and it used to be called within a family Swiss cottage. I'm not going to say why Swiss cottage, but now my lecture theater is my lecture shed. So in-person teaching, I must say, when I have heard about this, I was scared, because kind of we didn't know completely how this teaching is going to look like. And so I have then heard at some point that analysis is going to be the only module with in-person teaching. And I was really scared. So the purpose was not because it's material that you cannot communicate in different way, but they said because the students were invited to come to the campus, and now to have something that they can kind of come to the campus, kind of keep that connection and have this sense of community, belonging, and for some students, this was only in-person teaching for entire year. I'm also in UCU and their executive committee, and they were very controversial, all this in-person teaching. And I must say, they were hard work in the end, but I really enjoyed them. So you will see through my slides. And so Whitestone analysis was chosen as the only compulsory module, and probably was the idea then we are going to be fair with all year 2 students, all are going to get the same provision. And so now how to organize the whole cohort that is here. So I had 7 groups of approximately 25 students. It's kind of the numbers work as a multiple of 5 quite well. And so basically then I was one of the very, very few people from department that was allowed to be in the office, on the campus every day of the week. And I have been kind of teaching all these 7 groups, though I could have a help, but then I decided that this is something that I want to do. And I was scared also when hearing that the only in-person teaching, and I thought, oh my God, the students are here in Southampton, so only to kind of, what they cannot do elsewhere is come in person to my in-person classes. And I really kind of was a bit scared, but then I felt also moral obligation to go above and beyond my teaching and supporting the students. So this obligation is coming from background, one thing, and I think I need also to say that I'm from Croatia, and we have beginning of the 90s a war, and I kind of in a way saw pandemic in a sense. I saw I need kind of to protect the students to kind of go through this phase as least damage as possible. And then my experience, I mentioned already that I'm teaching analysis since 2012. This is my 20th, now I completed my 20th year of teaching in Southampton, and currently I'm principal teaching fellow here. Okay, so I'm now going through this individual components and how they transform, because this homework was 10% individual work. So now, the percentage increased, but what is important is that basically first, so I didn't know how to mark all the work. And I thought if I divide students into the groups, then I will need to mark less work, and because the students submit work as a group. So after kind of quite a lot of thinking and not knowing exactly what's going to happen, in the end, I have organized 36 study groups of 5 students. So you see here something that is written in a kind of slightly differently. I have also sent the students my slides to kind of feedback. I told them about this workshop today, and this is about teaching them. And I did ask them, oh, tell me what you think. So they were very surprised about this kind of aspect, how we engage so with our teaching and talking about this and conferences that was new to them. And so here I added few comments that students kind of felt should be taught. So I think in some other modules they had the groups, but they were kind of changing, and the students said that keeping groups the same throughout allowed the teams to build connections with each other and find ways that worked well for them to complete the work at hand. So basically all the students were reporting that at the beginning they were a bit scared, how is that going to work, how they are going to work with the people that they don't know, that they have never met. But then in the end, so a majority of them kind of got to know people, they become their friends and were talking about my family, my friends, and my study groups. So it was quite nice to read. And so what these groups were doing. So as I mentioned, there were 5 problem sheets. So the tasks were group tasks. So they would need to the given deadline submit solutions for the group. They were, as I said, multiple of 5 and 5 people. They would need to negotiate who is the lead, submission lead for each piece of work. Then they would mark work of another group. They would also then upload their feedback. They would need to have the marking lead, and then they were also giving and receiving feedback and commenting on how they have implemented feedback when submitting a new piece of work. And also what students kind of emphasize is this also teaches students how to organize themselves, schedule meetings and utilities and utilize the tools available on programs such as Microsoft Teams, what are employability skills now important when the future is filled with remote working. So the people were also kind of commenting on this when applying for internship and asking me to be one of their referees. And now 36 groups. I was thinking, oh, I cannot have an overview of 36 groups. So basically, I have year 3 and year 4 students that were so I had a project I called student-staff partnership, or students were my partners, volunteers from year 3, year 4. So that basically means that previously they have taken this module and they were the first person of contact for each group. So each partner, student partner, were overlooking 2 or 3 groups. And so this is just so here I want to keep this and expand for the next year. So now, the question, why the group tutors, so why I kind of went to, or how it came up with this student-led partners. I think it has increasingly the student-staff partnership is kind of gaining on agenda, and people already mentioned working with the students, what is really, really very rewarding. But so first, I've been told that probably I'm not going to have PhD students to help with everything. So this is then was so if you need help, ask for the help. You need to learn to ask for the help, I've been told. And so now why student as a partners? So also kind of came out of, I don't know, nowhere. So I have this kind of book club. I was invited to become a member of book club that in the end turns into community of practice that was around student as partners agenda. We were reading and commenting together Power of Partnership, a book that came in February last year. And there were many discussions. That's how idea came quite naturally to me. And I have been then talking with my group, few people from Ireland, from Manchester, and few universities in UK, and we were discussing, and they were my support all the way through. So last summer, end of August, I sent an email around, and I was able to recruit 14 students that wanted to act as volunteers. And I must say, I was so scared again, because I thought, oh, I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing. And now I attracted our best students to volunteer for this. In addition, what I need to mention, 2 students, according to their marks, they were less kind of, you would say, or their marks were less good. And they were questioned their ability. They said, we would really love to do this, but we don't know. And so we don't know if our analysis knowledge is good enough. So I did encourage them. I thought it's great that they applied, and I'm sure that they have some other experiences that we can use, and we will see working together and kind of valuing experiences which each one is bringing with them is a kind of underpinning all this kind of partnership agenda. So these are my 14 then amazing students. And so this is basically, now I will hear kind of maybe later on when talking about the feedback, I will say a few words about my feedback from the student partners. So you have seen another component where the quizzes. I think originally without COVID, I was thinking, oh, it's time that my analysis is getting some stuck questions, because I do kind of look what people are doing in respect to developing questions to assess analysis. However, I thought if I engaged with this, I'm not ever going to do anything else. So I kind of then, so I didn't continue with that idea. And I used so multiple choice questions on Blackboard that I have used for the very first time. And I think I was positive surprise, and with the time I also learned to write quite good questions. However, so there were 3 tests, and so there is also no educational explanation why 3. Actually, I didn't manage to write more of these tests. I was teaching also 2 other modules, and I think in total I have written 10 tests to 3 different modules. So I was really working to my very limit, and I was also not sure in advance when the test is going to happen, though I would know a week in advance. And students were quite forgiving. So in the past, they always kind of used to know through the whole semester what is going to happen when, and I just told them, okay, you will have individual tests as individual work, and I will tell you a week in advance, and that was good enough for them. So 5% reflective journal. I didn't know anything about reflective journals, I must say, and I was talking with the people in our education department, and this is something what they came up with, and they suggested to kind of ask the students to write a reflective journal through the semester about what they were facing as a challenges and what they were doing about them. So now you see the title of my talk, because I have repeated so many times to the students, write about challenges and what do you do about them. However, I thought I'm kind of repeating a few times. I had impression I'm suggesting negativity. So I also add, maybe in all this you found some strength that you didn't know that you have at the first place. So then write also about your strengths and how did you use it. And as a result, the students, I think the cohort was 177 students, and there were 6 students who did not submit reflective journals. But all others, I mean, I spent 3 days nonstop reading these reflective journals, and I think I was amazed. I didn't put much of the student feedback because I didn't want in any way. I think probably the only fair way would be to take a random comment, because I didn't want to evaluate students' comments. That kind of brought so insight into the students' life in this challenging time. So now we would like kind of to evaluate the scared exams coming, what's going to happen. So you have on one side of this slide how the exam was, the results, the average. I mean, that is very simplified way of looking into it. But just looking at this very basic level that is easy to compare. The weighting, as I already mentioned, was 20%, 80%. So the total mark is in the middle. So you have seen 1920 was average 54 for the module. Before that was a 60 and 57. And so maybe this slightly lower 54 is that was the year when UCU kind of there was strike, I was on a strike, so that probably influenced the students' learning. So now the weighting in this COVID time is 40 for coursework and 60 for open book exam. And so the average mark is 69. I think that students are much, much happier. So it is 91% coursework and 55% exam. It was open book exam, and I kind of put quite a lot of effort to make exam the relevant for our module based on our teaching material, but then not easy to Google. And, or I thought maybe it's not easy to Google, and probably with this 55% average, students were not able easily to Google or didn't. So basically our booklet became kind of focused learning material. And 90% because majority of the students engage with all activities, and that was the average of the coursework. Now, so two things have happened, that I have changed the nature of the coursework as well as the weighting. And with the weighting in the past of 20%, then average here would be 62%, what kind of wouldn't be much different from the previous. And so now, I mean, I'm asking usually many questions with respect to kind of procedures, because I am exams officer and director of assessment, and there are many questions then raised in that kind of environment. And my vetter asked, is it fair to give easy marks, because the coursework marks were in a way considered to be easy marks? And so I thought about the fairness in advance, and I thought, since it's compulsory module that everyone is taking, it is fair for these generations. But then the question was, what is with the past generations, or with the futures? And then I thought, there are so many different aspects that this generation could say it's not fair comparing with the previous or coming one. So I kind of didn't do that kind of comparison. And the student feedback, I will be very short. I'm not sure how much time, or I think I was kind of too much talking. So the students would email me after they met with their groups, and they were sharing so many things. And so I kind of really love one student say, oh, I made a very time speech in English before preparing a script. It was so exciting telling about it, how he managed to communicate math and how everyone in the group encouraged him, and he didn't prepare his script in advance. And the students were really mainly positive. So students usually, so as I said, I read many of these reflective journals, and the students usually were skeptic a bit about their kind of working with the people that they don't know in the study group, but that in the majority of the cases, I think I remember one person that didn't like it to the end, and then I met that person and we discussed why he didn't like it. So, and that is then the students. So here are the feedback for my partners. I would meet them every second week, yeah, because that would be end of one cycle, and we would discuss what kind of was going well, what didn't go well, what we can improve on, and so on. And there were, what was interesting is, so having a meeting, MS team meeting with them, very first meeting was with their cameras off, but then in the next one was a camera on, and if somebody would keep camera off, then would explain what was the problem. So students got mentioning award in a Dean's Delight at the Christmas party, where where Dean emphasized that when they went an extra mile in supporting fellow students during COVID. And what does this mean for my analysis? I don't know if you recognize the first quote, COVID-19 crisis did not go to waste. I read somewhere that Churchill said a good crisis, you shouldn't let go to waste. So I think this COVID crisis, it is crisis. And I think with respect to analysis, it didn't go to waste. I think my teaching was a hard work, but I feel much more rewarded than usually. And so I think for me, it was more authentic because it was kind of more of this social learning and getting to know students in spite of the fact that the majority of them never have seen in live, and that sometimes people stop me on the campus or somewhere saying, oh, are you Vesna? Did you teach me analysis? I was your student. And then, so yeah. And so I do think that this kind of, I'm going to then do the student partners. I already have 7 volunteers who said, oh, we would like to do it next year as module leads. And I would kind of keep this random group. So now organizations, I will see how, because some of organizations came because of the COVID structure imposed. Maybe some will reshape, but the core will kind of remain. And thank you, sorry, I think this was a bit long story, but so yeah, this is my analysis story, what I did and what I'm going to keep and what I learned. And thank you for being able to share the story. And I think I'm now stop sharing it.
Okay, yes, thank you. Well, maybe we'll just, because we're slightly over time here.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. You could have stopped me anytime. I know, because it's a whole story and I try to keep all aspects, but briefly. Yeah, so should we just maybe ask just one question then, because there's an interesting one which I think a lot of people would like to know the answer to on this one. How do you deal with a student who wants to keep his/her life private? So what do you mean with respect to the study groups or? Yeah, I think that's what it means, because you're asking them to do reflective journals and interact with other students. Oh yeah, so the marking was, yeah, so the marking was through the blackboard and it was anonymous. So for the many of the things, I don't know who said it, because I was kind of reading these documents over 3-day intense. My head was full of the comments, but if I would like to have exact quote from the students, I think I would need to do the more research. And that is, I mean, that came from School of Education. We said the students did ask how to reflect. Some students, so this is kind of, I think, important to use the skills that students already have, because some students didn't know anything about reflections. But the students coming from Wales, having a Wales baccalaureate or something like that, they said that they would so frequently need to reflect. And he was very comfortable with this. And he worked with a small group of my partners, student partners, who also had experience with reflecting for another module. And they put then some instructions together, and we created on a blackboard a folder, how to, and one was how to write a reflective journal. And since I kind of couldn't control, are we talking nonsense? And when we kind of completed document, I sent to colleagues to the School of Education saying, is this approximately okay to give us to students as instructions? And so that is. Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, just like to thank you once more for such a great talk, and of course, thanks to all other presenters today. And perhaps if you'd like to answer the questions in the, you can answer the questions via typing answers. So if you'd like to do that. Okay, yeah. So I will then. I couldn't. So I will questions and answers. So I can. We'll show you how to do that later. Yeah, so, yeah. Okay. Because I kind of couldn't talk and look at it. So. Oh, yeah,